I was only gone for 25 minutes. Just a normal lunch break, nothing special. I remember checking my phone twice, scrolling mindlessly, completely unaware that while I was sipping cold lemonade and waiting for my fries, something was happening back at the office, something that would flip my entire day upside down. The moment I stepped out of the elevator, I felt it. The shift in the air. People who normally smiled at me didn't meet my eyes. A couple of coworkers were whispering near the hallway, their expressions tight, almost nervous. At first, I thought maybe the system had crashed again or the boss had another one of his surprise announcements. But then I saw the door to my workspace. It was open, wide open, and 3 people I had never seen before were standing inside. Clipboards, gloves, a rolling case with some kind of scanner. They look like the kind of team you call when you're expecting a disaster, or when you think someone is hiding something. My heart dropped because nothing prepares you for seeing strangers digging through your workstation like you're part of a headline waiting to happen. One of them looked up at me and said, calmly, like this was the most normal thing in the world, "We're conducting an audit for irregularities. Please wait outside." Irregularities. That word hit harder than it should have. I knew my workspace wasn't messy. I knew I wasn't behind on work. I knew I hadn't broken any rules. So why were they auditing me specifically? And why now, when I wasn't even there to see what they were doing? I stepped back, trying to stay calm, but inside, my mind was racing. Had someone reported me? Was I being set up? Did they mix up my name with someone else's? The possibilities were endless, and none of them made sense. From the hallway, I could see them opening drawers one by one, scanning items, even checking under the desk. It felt like watching someone tear open your diary while you can't do anything about it. Every small sound, the clicking, the scribbling on clipboards, the soft beep of the scanner, just added to the tension building in my chest. My manager stood a few feet away, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I wanted to ask her what was going on, why they chose my workspace, why no one warned me. But the look on her face made it clear. She knew something, and she wasn't saying it. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, one of the auditors froze. He had opened the lower drawer, the one I rarely even touched. He reached inside slowly, like he was expecting something fragile or dangerous. The other 2 stepped closer, watching carefully. I leaned forward despite myself, my stomach twisting into a knot. And then he pulled something out, something I couldn't fully see from where I was standing. But whatever it was, it made all 3 auditors stop talking. They exchanged looks, quiet, serious ones. The kind that tell you everything is about to change, and not in a small way. My manager's eyes widened. Mine did too, because at that moment, I realized something. Whatever they found wasn't mine, and it wasn't something they could ignore. Before I could ask a single question, one of them turned toward the door, holding the object carefully, and said, "You need to come with us. Right now." The hallway went silent. My heartbeat didn't, and that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just an audit. This was the beginning of something much, much bigger. The hallway felt colder as I followed them, even though the office AC was always set to one boring temperature. Maybe it was the way the auditor in front of me kept glancing back, like he was making sure I wouldn't suddenly run. Or maybe it was because every step felt like I was walking deeper into something I didn't understand. People pretended not to stare, but I could feel their eyes on me. A few even stepped aside, giving me the kind of space you give someone who might be in trouble. The tension in the air was so thick I could almost hear it. They led me into a small meeting room, one of those glass-walled ones that were supposed to feel open and transparent, but right now just made me feel exposed. My manager slipped inside behind us, closing the door quietly, like she didn't want the sound to draw attention. I stood there, waiting, trying to keep my breathing steady. The object was still in the auditor's hand, wrapped in a small evidence bag. I couldn't see much except the shape. Thin, rectangular, almost like a card or a small device. He placed it on the table gently, like it was something sensitive, then looked at me. "We need you to explain this," he said. I stared at it, confused. I had never seen it before in my life. I opened my mouth to say exactly that, but the words wouldn't come out. Not because I was scared of them, no. It was the expression on my manager's face. She wasn't looking at the device. She was looking at me. Really looking. Searching. Measuring something I couldn't understand. Finally, I managed to speak. I don't know what that is. That wasn't in my drawer. They didn't react. They didn't even exchange glances, almost like they expected me to say that. The lead auditor leaned back slightly, resting his hands on the table. Your workstation was selected for an integrity audit, he said. Standard procedure. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. Right. Because having strangers dig through your things and then drag you into a room with something you've never seen before is totally normal. I wanted to ask why they chose me. Why not anyone else? But before I could, he continued, the item we found shouldn't have been there. It's restricted. He paused like he was choosing his next words carefully. And it was hidden. Hidden. That word stuck to me like glue. I didn't hide anything, I said quietly. Check my logs. Check the cameras. I wasn't even at my desk. We are reviewing everything, he replied. But we need to know if you recognize this item. I shook my head. No. I've never seen it. The room fell silent again. My manager shifted her weight slightly, like she was uncomfortable. I wondered if she believed me. I wondered if anyone did. For a second, I wanted to walk out. Just leave the building. Leave this mess. Pretend none of it was happening. But I stayed, because running would make me look guilty. And I wasn't guilty. At least, not of whatever this was. The lead auditor finally picked up the bag again and tucked it into a padded case. Then he stood up. We're not accusing you, he said. But we need to verify how this got into your workspace. Until then, we need you to remain available. Available. Another vague word that meant absolutely nothing but still felt dangerous. They stepped out, leaving me alone with my manager. She didn't talk at first. She just exhaled, slow and long, like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. Are you okay? She finally asked. No, I wasn't. But I nodded. She pulled out a chair, motioning for me to sit. I did. She sat across from me, her voice softer now. Someone must have put that there. The chill in my stomach deepened. Who would do that? She didn't answer right away. She looked at the glass wall, at the people walking by, at everything except me. It made me uneasy. Finally, she said, You know how things have been lately. The restructuring. The competition. People trying to protect their positions. I frowned. You think someone is trying to blame me? For what? She hesitated again. Too long. That was the problem. Her pauses weren't normal. Not her usual thoughtful ones. These were like she was deciding what to hide and what to share. I don't know, she said. But if someone wanted to create trouble for you, this would be one way. My mind raced through faces. Coworkers I joked with every morning. People who borrowed my stapler. People I shared snacks with. The idea that someone among them would plant something in my drawer felt unreal. Wrong. But the alternative, that some random object magically appeared on its own, was impossible. She stood up suddenly. For now, just act normal. Do your work. Don't talk about this to anyone. Act normal. Like it was that easy. I walked out of the room with her, feeling more eyes follow me. Whispering. Guessing. Making their own stories. When I finally reached my desk, I froze. Everything looked exactly as I left it. My notebook. My mug. The half-finished report on the screen. Except the sense of safety that used to come with the space was gone. Completely gone. I sat down slowly, the chair feeling colder than usual. The drawer, the one they opened, the one where they found that thing. I pulled it open slowly. Empty. Clean. Like it had been reset. I closed it again. I tried to focus on work. I really did. But every time I typed a sentence, my eyes drifted back to that drawer. My mind kept replaying the moment they pulled that object out. The serious looks. The silence. The weight in the air. Then something even stranger happened. An email notification popped up. No subject. No signature. Just one line. Be careful who you trust. That was it. A chill shot through me, so fast I almost dropped my mouse. My hands felt cold, my heartbeat uneven. I looked around the office, wondering who could have sent it. Everyone looked normal. Busy. Focused. Like they had no idea my entire day had exploded. I read the line again. Be careful who you trust. Was it a warning? A threat? A hint? The timing was too perfect to be random. I clicked to see the sender. Anonymous. Of course. I closed the email quickly, my fingers trembling just a little. A part of me wanted to report it, but another part of me wasn't even sure who to report it to. The auditors? My manager? What if the message was from someone trying to help me? My thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of a chair sliding back behind me. I turned. It was Daniel, one of my coworkers, friendly, always chatting, always smiling. Except today, he wasn't smiling. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I studied his face, trying to read something. But he looked blank. Concerned, maybe. Or curious. "Yeah, I lied. Just a weird day." He nodded slowly, his eyes drifting toward the drawer. "Yeah, I heard." My heart tightened. "You heard what?" He shrugged casually, but it didn't match the sharp look in his eyes. "People talk." I waited for him to say more. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned slightly closer and whispered, "If I were you, I'd watch my back." Before I could respond, he stood up and walked away. Not a smile. Not a joke. Nothing. I stared at his empty chair, the unease in my chest spreading. First the object. Then the message. Now this. Something was happening around me. Something planned. Something hidden. And I wasn't supposed to figure it out. But I could feel it. Whatever they found in my drawer was only the first piece. And someone in this office wanted me caught in the middle of it, whether I liked it or not. And the worst part, I still had no idea who or why. The rest of the afternoon felt like walking through fog. Every time someone passed by my desk, I caught myself studying their expression, wondering if they knew something, or if they were the reason all this was happening. The tension in the office was impossible to ignore now. People whispered a little too quietly, glanced at me a little too quickly, and pretended they weren't doing either. Even the usual noises, keyboards, printers, footsteps, felt heavier, as if the whole floor was holding its breath. I tried focusing on my work, but my mind kept circling around the same questions. Who put that item in my drawer? Why my desk out of all the others? And why did the auditors seem so prepared for what they found? It was the kind of overthinking you can't shut off, no matter how hard you try. And the more I tried to ignore it, the louder the questions became. Around 3 p.m., I noticed something odd. My email refreshed, and a small notification appeared saying, "New access logged." It was a system notification we occasionally got, usually when we logged in on a different device. Except I hadn't logged in anywhere. My computer had been at my desk all day. I clicked the notification, and a small window opened. Access from Internal Review Terminal 02. A terminal I had never used. A terminal that wasn't even on our floor. My stomach tightened. Someone had opened my account. Not just looked at it, they had gone inside it. I checked the log details, but the system blocked most of the information. Unauthorized access. Hidden. I sat back in my chair, fingers hovering above the keyboard, unsure if I should tell someone or keep this to myself. My manager told me not to mention anything, but now this felt like another piece of the puzzle. Or maybe another warning. Before I could decide, another email came in. No subject again. "You're being monitored. Stop looking." I froze. Monitored? My eyes drifted up toward the ceiling. The office cameras were placed in the usual spots, nothing new. But suddenly they felt closer. Sharper. Like someone, somewhere, was watching more than they should. My computer beeped again. A message from the internal chat system. "Daniel, meet me near the back break room." I stared at the message. The break room in the back was always empty in the afternoons. It was where people went when they didn't want anyone overhearing them. And after the way he warned me earlier, I knew this wasn't about small talk. I shut down my screen and walked there slowly, trying to look as normal as possible. When I pushed open the door, Daniel was already inside, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. His expression was serious, sharper than I'd ever seen it. "Took you long enough," he said. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He glanced toward the hallway, then back at me. "You're not the first person they've done this to." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "Last year, during the first round of restructuring, they accused one of the analysts of tampering with restricted files. Same thing. Surprise audit. Something planted in his drawer. Sudden investigation. He swore he didn't do anything, but they pushed him out anyway. I felt a chill run down my arms. Why would they do that? What's the point?" Daniel shook his head. "You're thinking about it wrong. It's not about what they found. It's about who they want out. The words hit hard. So this is targeted? His jaw tightened. Someone wants your position, or your project, or your name off something important. I don't know. He paused. But I know they're not done. A knot formed in my stomach. Did you see the audit team before today? He nodded slowly. Twice. They talked to management both times. I stepped back slightly, but I didn't do anything. I barely even used that drawer. Daniel's voice dropped. That's exactly why they used it. It needed to look planted but believable. The back of my neck tingled. Okay, but why me? Who would even bother? Daniel hesitated. Too long. Again. Then he said something I didn't expect. You've been working on that new data integration project, right? Yes. And you're the one presenting the report next week. I nodded again, slower this time. That project has eyes on it, he said. Big ones. People higher up than you think. My pulse jumped. Are you saying someone is trying to stop the presentation? Or take credit for it, he replied. The silence between us grew heavy. I had spent months working on that project. Late nights, early mornings, fixing bugs no one else wanted to deal with. If someone wanted it badly enough to sabotage me, that was a whole different level of danger. Before I could say anything else, the break room door swung open. We both snapped upright. It was Lena, another coworker. She looked surprised to see us. Oh, I didn't know anyone was in here. Her eyes flicked between us, but there was something in her expression that didn't sit right. Too alert, too aware, like she expected someone to be here. Daniel stepped away from the counter. We were just leaving. Lena smiled, but only with her lips. Right. We walked out, and as soon as we were in the hallway, I whispered, Do you think she heard us? Daniel shook his head, but his voice dropped again. Doesn't matter. Trust no one. When I got back to my desk, something was different. My chair had been moved, slightly. Not much, just an inch or two, but enough for me to know it wasn't where I left it. I looked around. No one was paying attention to me. No one was standing suspiciously close. Everything looked normal. But my workspace didn't feel like mine anymore. I sat down, and as I did, a small folded paper slipped out from under the keyboard. No email this time. No sender. Just a handwritten note. Stop digging. You won't like what you find. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't just some office misunderstanding anymore. Someone was watching me closely, closer than I realized. Someone who didn't want me to figure out what was happening. I folded the note and tucked it into my pocket. My heartbeat was loud now, pulsing in my ears. I forced my hands to stay still on the desk. But inside, everything was shaking. And in that moment, I understood something very clearly. This wasn't about an object in a drawer. This was about control. Someone was pulling strings, and I had no idea why or how far they were willing to go. But I was already caught in the middle. And the only thing more dangerous than not knowing the truth was finding it. The rest of the office day moved in slow motion, like time was stretching itself just to make everything feel heavier. Every small sound made me jump. The ping of an elevator, the click of a stapler, footsteps behind my chair. I kept replaying Daniel's warning, the email, the note, the strange access log. None of it connected clearly, but in my gut, everything felt wrong, like all the pieces were pointing toward something big, something hidden just out of reach. Around 5, most people began packing up. Normally, I would have done the same, but leaving didn't feel safe. Not when someone was clearly watching me, not when every step felt like it was being followed by a shadow I couldn't see. I pretended to stay busy, clicking through files, reviewing documents I'd already seen 100 times. I didn't want whoever was monitoring me to think I knew anything. Then, as the office slowly emptied, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. Someone stopped at my desk. Not a coworker. Not my manager. One of the auditors. He didn't touch anything. He didn't speak. He just glanced around, then slipped a small card under my notebook before walking away casually, like it meant nothing. I waited a few seconds, making sure he had turned the corner. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted the notebook. A keycard. Plain white. No logo. No name. Just a small piece of tape on the back with one word written in black ink. After hours, my breath caught in my throat. Why would an auditor, someone supposed to detect irregularities, secretly hand me a keycard? Was he helping me? Or was this another trap designed to confuse me even more? I stared at the card, feeling its weight even though it was light. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't random. This was something intentional. And whatever they expected me to do with it was definitely not part of normal office procedure. The last few employees trickled out. The lights dimmed slightly as the building switched to evening mode. The air felt still, almost too quiet. It would have been easy to slip out and pretend none of this was happening. But that wasn't an option anymore. Not when someone had gone this far. I slid the keycard into my pocket. Then, just as I stood to leave my desk, my phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. Same style as the emails. Whatever you do, don't go alone. A cold wave crashed through me. Someone knew I'd received the keycard. Someone knew what I was thinking before I even acted. But why warn me? Why help at all? Daniel. He was the only one who had shown any sign of caring. Or maybe he just wanted information. Either way, he was the only person I could ask. I found him near the lobby, grabbing his bag. He looked tired, distracted, but when he saw my face, he stopped. "What now?" he asked quietly. I handed him the card. He stared at it for a moment, then looked up sharply. "Where did you get this?" One of the auditors put it under my notebook. Daniel's expression darkened. "This is a secure access card. Only high-level staff have these. This isn't normal." "I know," I whispered. He hesitated, then lowered his voice even more. "If you're going to use it, you can't go alone." My heart beat faster. "So you believe the message?" "I don't know who sent it," Daniel said. "But they're right. If someone wants to trap you, this is exactly how they do it." A part of me wanted to turn around and go home, pretend this whole day never happened. But deep down, I knew there was no going back. Whoever planted the item, whoever sent the warnings, whoever accessed my account, they weren't done yet. And if I didn't figure out why, I'd be walking blind into whatever they planned next. Daniel looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "Where does the card lead?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It just says after hours." He took a slow breath. "Then we find out." We waited until the lobby cleared. The building was almost empty now, just security guards and cleaning staff. The silence felt heavier than the noise ever did. Every echo sounded sharper. Every shadow seemed longer. We moved toward the restricted elevator at the back of the hall, one I'd passed 100 times but never used. I took out the card. My hands shook slightly, but I tried to steady them. Daniel stood close, watching the hallway. I tapped the card against the scanner. A soft beep. Green light. The elevator unlocked. A faint chill went through me. I stepped inside, Daniel right behind me, though he stayed close to the door like he was ready to pull me out if something went wrong. Inside, there were no normal floor buttons. Just numbers. Lots of them. Some labeled. Some not. "What floor?" Daniel whispered. One button blinked faintly. Sublevel 3. I pressed it. The elevator began to descend, slowly at first, then faster. My ears popped slightly. The hum of machinery grew louder, echoing off the metal walls. The deeper we went, the more uneasy I felt. "This building has basements," I whispered. Daniel gave a tight nod. "Storage. Servers. Stuff we're not supposed to see." When the elevator stopped, the doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. The hallway was dim, lit by spaced-out overhead lights that flickered softly. It looked nothing like the floors above. No modern decor. No sound of computers. Just concrete, doors, and an unnerving quiet. We stepped out carefully. A faint hum filled the space, low, constant, like distant machinery. The air smelled different, colder, like a place sealed away from everything else. Then we saw it. A room at the end of the hall with light seeping from beneath the door. The exact kind of room someone would lead you to if they wanted you to discover something, or fall straight into a setup. Daniel leaned close. "Are you sure about this?" "No," I whispered. "But I need to know." We walked slowly toward the door. Each step made my pulse quicken. The closer we got, the louder the hum became. When we reached the door, I could hear something else. Voices. Muffled but intense. Someone inside was arguing. I exchanged a look with Daniel. His eyes were wide, alert. Then we both froze. A voice from inside said my name. Clear as day. Firm. Unmistakable. Daniel grabbed my wrist, pulling me back into the shadow of a nearby doorway. My heartbeat thundered. My palms turned cold. Someone inside that room, someone with access to the restricted levels, was talking about me. I strained to hear. The timing has to be perfect. They won't suspect. Make sure they don't escape. And then again. Bring them in tonight. The breath caught in my throat. Them. Not me. Us. Whoever they were planning for, it wasn't over. Not even close. Daniel slowly backed us away, his voice barely above a whisper. We need to leave. Now. But as we turned to go back to the elevator, the lights in the hallway flickered once, then dimmed. A heavy click echoed down the corridor. The elevator door had locked. And from the far end of the hall, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming straight toward us. Every nerve in my body went still. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. And whoever was coming for us. The footsteps grew clearer with every second, echoing off the concrete walls like a slow countdown. I pressed myself deeper into the shadow of the doorway, barely daring to breathe. Daniel moved beside me, tense, eyes fixed on the dim corridor. The lights flickered again, sinking the hall into a sickly yellow glow that made everything feel distorted. Stay quiet, he whispered, though I already had no intention of making a sound. The figure finally appeared at the far end. Not security, not an auditor, someone else entirely. The person moved with purpose, like they already knew exactly where we were. A clipboard was tucked under their arm, and their ID badge swung lightly with each step, though I couldn't make out the name from the distance. My heart hammered, so loud I thought it would give us away. Then, just as the figure stepped under one of the overhead lights, Daniel's eyes widened. That's not possible, he muttered under his breath. I looked at him sharply, but he didn't explain. His focus stayed on the person approaching us. Whoever it was, they weren't rushing. They weren't looking around. They walked straight, calm, like they owned this place. And the fact they weren't surprised to see the elevator locked meant one thing: they were part of whatever was happening below this building. The figure reached the door we'd just been listening through. They tapped a code into a small panel I hadn't noticed earlier. The door slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss, and from inside, I heard voices stop abruptly. Someone asked, "Is it done?" The person nodded and stepped inside, letting the door shut behind them. Daniel grabbed my arm. "We have to go. Now." "But how?" I whispered. "The elevator is locked." Daniel looked down the hallway, eyes scanning. "There's another way. There has to be." We moved along the wall, staying low, careful. As we passed the door they just entered, I could hear the voices again. Tight, focused, serious. They weren't talking about audits. They weren't talking about office policy. This was something else altogether. Something planned. Something organized. I caught fragments, words like transfer, access, and replacement. Enough to make my skin crawl. We reached the far end of the hall where a heavy metal door stood partly open. A faint draft came from inside, carrying a colder smell like machinery and dust. Daniel pushed it open slowly. Behind it, a narrow maintenance corridor stretched into darkness. "This leads to the utility stairs," he whispered. "But it's not supposed to be unlocked." "So why is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. Not because he didn't hear me, but because we both already knew the answer. Someone wanted us down here. Not in that meeting room. Not caught by the footsteps. But in this hallway. This route. This moment. We stepped inside anyway. The door closed behind us with a low metallic thud that made the hair on my arms rise. The corridor was dark except for a few emergency lights spaced far apart. Our footsteps echoed as we moved deeper. The hum from the other rooms faded, replaced by the faint buzzing of electrical lines running behind the walls. Then, halfway through the corridor, Daniel stopped suddenly. His breathing changed. Sharper. Alarmed. "What?" I whispered urgently. He pointed to a small panel on the wall, one with blinking lights. Most were green, but one was flashing red. "Motion sensors," he murmured. "Someone's tracking movement in the sublevels." My stomach dropped. "They know we're here?" "Not exactly," he said. "But someone will check this corridor soon." We picked up the pace, moving quickly without running. The corridor twisted left, then right, and just as we rounded the last corner, we found another stairwell door. But this door was wide open. The stairwell inside was dimly lit and cold, spiraling upward and downward. The silence felt heavy, wrapped in something old and forgotten. "We go up," Daniel said. "We can get to the second basement and re-enter the main elevators." I stepped toward the stairs, but stopped. Another sound echoed up from below. Footsteps. More than one set this time. Coming fast. Not slowly, like the person earlier. Not calm. These sounded urgent, like they were searching. Daniel's face went pale. "They're sweeping the levels. We have to go up," I whispered. We climbed quickly but quietly, our footsteps barely audible. Every step made my legs shake. Every creak of the metal railing made my heart leap. The higher we went, the louder the footsteps below became. Someone was definitely coming after us. We reached the landing for sublevel 2. The hallway light flickered. I tapped the card on the scanner. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. "It's been deactivated," Daniel said, voice low. My chest tightened. Someone upstairs had already blocked the card. They knew exactly where we were headed. They were staying ahead of us. I looked up the stairwell. Then we go to sublevel 1. We climbed again, our breaths getting shorter, the tension growing thicker. The footsteps below grew sharper, turning into more than just footsteps. Voices. Radio clicks. Short commands. Whoever they weren't guessing. They knew someone was here. We reached the next landing. The scanner on this door blinked red before I even tried the card. Locked too. My pulse quickened. "We're trapped." "No," Daniel said, scanning the stairwell. "There has to be another exit." His eyes locked onto a narrow maintenance ladder built into the wall, going further up to a faint outline of a hatch. "That leads to the ventilation access," he said. "It's tight, but it might get us out." "Or it might not open," I said. Daniel gave a thin, sharp smile. "We're past choices." We moved to the ladder. Daniel climbed first. I followed, the metal cold under my hands. Below us, the voices grew louder, echoing into our stairwell now. They were close. Too close. Daniel reached the hatch and pushed. It didn't budge. He pushed harder. Nothing. My heartbeat clawed at my throat. "Try again." He braced his shoulder and shoved with everything he had. The hatch popped open with a screech. But at the same moment, a voice below echoed sharply. "There! On the stairs!" Daniel's head jerked toward me. "Go!" I climbed the last steps, pulling myself into the narrow space as Daniel followed, slamming the hatch shut just as footsteps thundered onto the landing below. We pressed ourselves against the cold metal floor of the ventilation shaft, breathing fast, listening. Muffled voices filled the stairwell. "Check the corridor." They couldn't have gone far. The card was used on sublevel 3. They're still inside. Then the worst line of all. They can't reach the surface. Not before the transfer. Transfer. That was the second plot twist. The escalation. This wasn't just about sabotaging my job. This wasn't a petty office rivalry. This wasn't even about the object planted in my drawer. Something bigger was happening. Something involving restricted levels, hidden meetings, and now a transfer. And somehow, I wasn't just caught in the middle. I was directly connected to it. Daniel turned to me slowly in the dim shaft, his face shadowed but unmistakably serious. "They're not just after you," he whispered. "They're preparing for something, and we're not supposed to know about it." The metal below us creaked. Boot steps, directly under our bodies. I held my breath, every muscle frozen. Whatever was coming next would push everything to the edge. When the conference room door finally swung open, everyone turned to look at me as if I'd been summoned to face something I wasn't prepared for. My heart was pounding, but a strange calm settled over me too. Maybe it was because after everything that had happened, the audit, the mysterious files planted in my drawer, the hidden camera I never knew existed, the strange warning left on my desk, I had reached the point where I simply needed the truth. No more running in circles. No more guessing. No more feeling like the ground was slipping from beneath my feet. I stepped inside, and the entire leadership team sat across the long table, faces tense and unreadable. Martin cleared his throat first, though even he looked uneasy. He slid a folder toward me. Not thick, not stuffed with evidence. Just a single envelope tucked inside. For a second I hesitated, feeling the weight of every moment that had led up to this. I could sense the turning point. Everyone was waiting for me to open it. So I did. Inside was a simple printout of a report, not the kind that exposed wrongdoing, but one that documented all the irregularities found during the audit. Except none of them were tied to me. In fact, several suspicious entries were traced back to a system login that didn't belong to any employee. A ghost login. The room stayed silent as I scanned the papers. The more I read, the more the truth unfolded. This wasn't an accident. Someone had intentionally set up the audit, planted files, and tried to throw everything on me. But why? And then I noticed the last page. A single image, grainy but clear enough. The hidden camera footage. It wasn't pointed at me like I feared. It was pointed at my desk from an angle that didn't match the office layout. The timestamp was from the day before the audit. Someone had been in the office after hours. The figure was blurred, wearing a hoodie, deliberately keeping their face away from the camera, but the height, the posture, something about them felt familiar. Before I could ask anything, Martin spoke again, softer this time. There's more. We didn't call you here to accuse you. We called you here because we think you're the only one who can help us figure out what's going on. His tone made it clear that this wasn't the triumphant reveal I'd imagined. This was the climax of a story far more complicated and far more personal than any of us had realized. I set the folder down and looked at each of them. Their expressions were mixed: concern, confusion, and in some cases fear. The strange system login had been accessing confidential financial files for months. Data had been quietly copied, altered, and moved without raising alerts. The only reason the audit even happened was because someone tipped them off anonymously. That alone opened a new question. Who warned them and why? Then something hit me like a sudden flash. The warning note left on my desk had been telling me to watch closely and to look deeper. I had assumed it was connected to whoever framed me. But what if it wasn't? What if someone else was trying to protect me? Or trying to reveal the truth? And then came the twist that wrapped everything together. Martin slid another document toward me, one I didn't even want to touch at first. It was the employment record of someone who had left the company almost a year ago. Someone whose exit had never made sense. Someone I once worked closely with. It was Alex, my former coworker who had been let go suddenly without explanation. The same Alex who had access to the systems that were manipulated. The same Alex who once joked about knowing back doors into the company's software. The same Alex who disappeared after leaving, without leaving a forwarding number or even a goodbye. My head was spinning as the pieces finally snapped into place. The blurry figure in the footage had the same build. The same walk. The same slight slump of the shoulders. I didn't want to believe it at first, but denial couldn't hold anymore. Alex had been inside the company, sneaking in through old access points, altering files, planting evidence, and somehow using my workspace as the center of the entire setup. But the biggest question remained, was Alex trying to frame me, or trying to expose something even bigger? Everyone stared at me, waiting for a reaction. I felt my throat tighten as 1,000 memories flooded back. Late-night projects with Alex, conversations about unfair policies, frustrations about the company ignoring problems, and Alex's growing bitterness. But bitterness alone doesn't create a plan this elaborate. This was something deeper, something that had been simmering for a long time. And then, just when I thought the revelations were over, Martin leaned forward and dropped the final twist. The ghost login wasn't just any random access code. It was tied to an old internal investigation file, one that Alex had been working on before being quietly removed. A file labeled under a single word: Irregularities. Everything came full circle in that instant. The audit wasn't about me. It wasn't even about mismanagement. It was about something Alex had uncovered long before anyone realized. Something they tried to bring forward but were shut down for. And now, somehow, I had been pulled into it. My pulse raced as the truth settled heavily in my mind. Alex wasn't just hiding in the shadows. They were still watching, still digging, still trying to finish what they started. But that also meant something else. If Alex knew I was being blamed, they might also think I was closer to the truth than I really was. And that meant they could be planning their next move. The room was silent as I looked up at them. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. Everything that had happened so far was only the beginning. Someone had sparked a fire long before the audit day, and now I was standing right in the middle of it. And if Alex was truly behind this, then the truth wasn't just buried, it was being guarded. The climax had finally arrived, but the real impact was only now starting to reveal itself. And as I took a breath, trying to steady myself, one final thought chilled me more than anything else. If Alex had been inside the building once, what was stopping them from coming back again? The story may have reached its breaking point, but the consequences were just beginning to unfold. The room stayed quiet long after the last page in the folder settled on the table. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting to see if I would break down, lash out, or demand explanations none of them could give. But oddly, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. Maybe because finally, everything was out in the open. The chase, the confusion, the feeling of being watched, the planted files, the anonymous warning, it all connected now. The tension that had tangled itself around my thoughts loosened just enough for me to think clearly again. And that clarity made the next step obvious. I told them I wanted to help. Not just to clear my name, though that mattered, but to understand what Alex had discovered before being pushed out. The leadership team exchanged glances, but no one argued. After everything, they knew I had become too deep in this without even meaning to. And maybe they trusted me now more than they trusted their own system, which had clearly been compromised. Martin slid me a small USB drive sealed in a transparent evidence pouch. He said it was found near the network hub the night Alex entered the building. They hadn't been able to decrypt it, but it likely held whatever Alex wanted to expose. The drive felt heavier than it should, like it carried the entire story inside it. I held it carefully as we left the conference room, heading toward the IT lab. The corridor felt longer than usual, like each step pushed me deeper into a truth that couldn't be undone. When we reached the lab, the security team had already set up a controlled environment to open the files without risking the company system. I stood behind the lead technician as he connected the drive. For a moment, it didn't register. The screen stayed blank. But then, slowly, a single directory appeared. Inside was a folder labeled before they erase it. My stomach twisted. The technician opened it, and dozens of files flashed across the screen. Financial discrepancies, old communication logs, quietly reassigned budgets, and reports with missing signatures. It was proof, clear and organized, that the irregularities didn't start yesterday. They had been happening long before I was hired, and Alex had been the one trying to trace them, putting together the pieces before anyone else realized the bigger picture. The files told a story of small changes that added up to a major pattern. Someone had been shifting funds into a separate pathway, one that didn't match any official project. And by the time Alex found out, it was too late. They were removed before they could finish their investigation. The most shocking part was a document at the bottom of the folder, a message written by Alex, almost like a letter they hoped someone would find someday. It explained how they noticed things that didn't add up, how they reported it but were told to drop it, and how they believed someone inside the company was trying to bury the truth. The last line gave me chills. If I disappear from here, someone else will have to pick up the thread. I hope it's someone who won't be afraid to look where I couldn't. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I finally exhaled slowly. It was never about me. I was never meant to be the scapegoat. I was the distraction, the person everyone looked at while the real problem stayed hidden. But at the same time, Alex had left breadcrumbs, subtle ones, to lead someone else toward the truth. That someone ended up being me. It wasn't planned. It wasn't intentional. But it happened. By the time we finished reviewing the files, the leadership team had a full picture of what had been going on. They called an emergency meeting to plan the next steps. This time, they asked me to join, not as a suspect, but as someone whose perspective mattered. That alone felt like a quiet victory I hadn't expected. During the meeting, decisions were made quickly. An internal investigation would be launched, law enforcement would be notified, and the company's systems would be rebuilt with new security controls. No more ghost logins. No more unlocked paths. No more hiding. One question still hung in the air. Where was Alex now? We didn't know. The security team searched the building footage again, but found no sign of them returning after the night of the audit. It was like they vanished. Maybe that was their plan all along, to leave a final trail and fade out once someone else could take it from there. Or maybe they were watching from a distance, making sure everything played out the way it needed to. I couldn't be sure, but I found myself hoping they were okay, wherever they were. As days passed, the storm slowly calmed. The company released a public statement about irregularities discovered during a routine security review, keeping details vague but honest enough to reassure clients and staff. New protocols were introduced. My workspace, once the center of confusion, felt normal again. The air around me wasn't heavy anymore. People who once eyed me with suspicion now stopped to ask if I was okay. Funny how quickly things change once the truth comes out. One afternoon, as I packed up to head home, I found something in my drawer. At first, my stomach dropped, fearing it was another planted item. But when I picked it up, I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was a note, just a small folded paper. All it said was, "You looked deeper." That's all that mattered. There was no signature, no instructions, no hint of where it came from. But I didn't need one. It was enough. A quiet closure from someone who had started the whole thing. Someone who trusted me without even knowing me. I slipped the note into my pocket and stepped outside, feeling the cool air hit my face. It wasn't the dramatic ending I expected, but it was the one that felt right. The conflict was resolved, the irregularities exposed, and the weight lifted. And still, the story left a soft thread hanging. Not a cliffhanger, but a reminder that sometimes the real heroes are the ones who work in the shadows, unnoticed, uncredited, but determined. As I walked toward the parking lot, I realized something important. This experience changed me. Not in a dramatic movie-style way, but in a quiet, human way. I learned to trust my instincts,